Hello, everybody, and welcome to The View from the Top. It is Wednesday, and we are live, and we have got an amazing show for you as ever. We have, well, you know who they are. We have our dynamic duo. They're here. Where are they? We have our dynamic duo. There you are. We have Julia Onslow-Cole and Pat Jurgens, and I'll leave it to you to work out which is which. We have the dynamic duo. We also, of course, have our very special guest, and I'm delighted to say that our special guest today is Emanuela Boccagni, or Emma to her friends, Emma Boccagni from ECA. She's the commercial director of ECA, and she's going to be talking to us about some of the things that ECA have been finding during the pandemic. They've issued a survey recently on managing the mobility function. We're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about their predictions for the future, and we're going to be talking about a whole new concept that I hadn't heard of before, but I won't tell you about it until we get there. So we've got loads of stuff coming up. As ever, I think you know how it works. So please, write in the comments box, tell us who you are, where you are. I can see comments are coming in already, which is great. I can see we're having people from Nelly, we've got Jessica, we've got Lisa Fontana, hundreds of people coming in. This is just fabulous. It's so nice to see so many friends coming in and joining us today. I think you all know as well that we are approved for all sorts of credits. Whatever credits you want, you can get them with us. So you can get your GMS credits and your and CRP, and that's courtesy of ERC, and also from our friends at Rocket Mortgage, you can get your HRCI and SHRM credits. And about 3/4 of the way into the show, we will be releasing those codes. So stay with us, get the codes. If you want to claim your credits, then that's where you get them. And what about coming up? Well, we've got some fun shows coming up. Today, of course, is The View from the Top. Oh, that's nice, what Steve said. Always look forward to Wednesdays with Benevo and the great, I missed it, it went, and the great whatever. Anyway, so that's, and the great program. So there we go. Thanks for that, Steve. We really appreciate that. So what we've got next week on Benevo Bites, which is our tech show, is we've got two legends of Silicon Valley. We've got Wes Okamura and Eric Halverson. Wes is ex-EY, Eric is ex-eBay. They actually both on the Benevo Strategy Council, and they're going to be talking about the future of tech in mobility. So we're going to have a real old chat about what it's going to look like. We're going to be sort of laying back and thinking about what the future could be and how much of the future is there at the moment and what is it going to be like in the next 5 to 10 years. So we've got a fascinating show on Benevo Bites next week. And then the week after that, in fact, carrying on the Silicon Valley theme, I'm delighted to say that our special guest is Steve Brown, who's the head of talent and career mobility at Electronic Arts. And Steve, again, is an industry veteran. He's worked at such prestigious companies, apart from Electronic Arts, as Nike and Accenture. So he's got a lot that he's going to share with us. So we're having a real Bay Area feel over the next couple of weeks. What else have I got to tell you? Well, the top 100 service providers. I hope you've made your nominations. If you haven't, I'm afraid it is too late. We said the deadline was 31st of March. We are as good as our word. We closed on the 31st of March. Incredibly, 1,100 separate people have submitted nominations. Now, given that people could submit up to 10 nominations, you can imagine we have got many, many, many hundreds of nominations. We haven't been through them all yet. We haven't got to that stage. They're still crunching the numbers, but there will have been thousands of nominations, which is just so exciting. And we're going to be releasing that in a few weeks' time. We're running the numbers. We're doing all the prep work. You've probably seen the website for the corporate one. We get a nice website up there. That all takes a bit of time. Bear with us. But it has been a phenomenal response. So thank you, everybody, for taking part. We really, really do appreciate everything you're doing to support us. So what else can I tell you? Well, I think I've mentioned it before, actually, but Beneva is hiring. And in particular, we're hiring in London at the moment. We're hiring account executives. So if that's something that might be of interest to you, especially anybody that's got a tech background, then do give us a shout. Anyway, that's by way of an introduction. I know you don't really come here for my introduction. You come here to meet some of the stars of the show. And I've mentioned we've got the dynamic duo coming up, and I'm delighted to announce now that our first member of the dynamic duo, the one and only, the legend that is Julia Onslow-Cole, is about to join us. So let's bring Julia on stage. Let's give her a big view from the top round of applause. So please hit the like button, hit the applaud button, hit the heart button. And Julia is back with us from Dubai and from the Maldives. So let's give her a big old-fashioned view from the top. Welcome. Julia,
hi.
well,
Hi.
So you've been traveling, but you're now back in the UK.
I am. Yes, it's quite cold actually. Yes, I think Andres. I'm in Winchester, like Andres at the moment, and it's actually sunny and then snowing.
Okay, well, we'll get to actually one thing I forgot to mention in my introduction. I just want to mention it now because I promised I would. Is that I mentioned it last week as well. Is that there is a wonderful survey out now by HSBC, the Expat Explorer Survey. It's in its 14th year. And if you haven't taken part in it, I do recommend it. You can just go to expatexplorer.hsbc.com. It is actually the world's largest survey for individual expats. And I appreciate that many of our viewers are themselves expats, or it might be you have people in your organizations that want to take part. So I just want to give that a little gentle plug because it seems a jolly good thing. Okay. Anyway, Julia, you're going to be talking to us today about a slightly different topic. We've talked about work and visas. You're going to be talking about citizenship today, I gather.
Yes. And I had a chat with Pat in the week, and so he's actually going to talk about the tax issues relating to it as well.
Oh my God! So you're coordinated. This is just
see, we're talking about you behind the scenes.
I'm super delighted. This is just fab. Okay, so talk to us about citizenship by investment.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say thank you very much to Nofi Mujidi and also to Isabel Nilsson, who are experts on this subject in Fragment. But basically what I'm talking about is citizenship that you can acquire by making an investment. And there are a number of programs around the world that actually allow you to do this. And during the pandemic, we've seen a huge rise of interest in this subject. And basically, it's like a sort of big extension of the remote working visa. So people have actually looked around the world, seen during the pandemic that they'd like to have a place where they could go with their children, their family, with their business, and work freely and live freely. And so also there's a very interesting survey that's just been done by Henley and Partners, and it was actually looking at this kind of phenomena, and it was saying that people
are, aren't they?
Yes, and it was actually saying that, they're really looking, people are looking at the healthcare capacity. So now that's another factor that they would really take into consideration when they're looking at sort of which country that they might make an investment in. So the other reason why senior executives might wish to do this, and I've had a couple of cases myself, is British citizens who have strong ties in Europe, perhaps a home in Europe, but also have been working very freely under the previous free movement rights. And now having left the EU, they find that, it's rather difficult to manage their personal lives only living in Europe for a certain amount of days, and also they're not having the ability to work across Europe. So a European citizenship by investment scheme is particularly popular. Now, Cyprus, which was the kind of major go-to place for citizenship by investment for Europe, has shut its scheme. But Malta has just opened, in fact, literally in the last couple of days, they've just opened a new scheme.
Okay, so we're all Maltesers.
Yes, yes. And there's two avenues that you could do. One is that you have 12 months of effective residence in Malta and a donation of 750,000 euros. Or the other one, you have 36 months and a lesser sum of 600,000 euros. And one of the big changes...
Whichever way we're going, we're talking about high net worth here.
Yes. And, you know, one of the things about the new changes are that the whole family have to come and fulfill the residency requirements. So before, it was just the main applicant. But a big change of this new scheme is that everyone has to fulfill the residency requirements, which are basically the family's got to spend no less than 20 days in a 12-month period in Malta in order to qualify for the citizenship. And also the whole family have to be going to Malta for each stage of the application. And we have been successfully negotiating discretionary travel waivers to Malta for clients so that they can submit that application despite the COVID travel restrictions. Now, as Brian said, that's quite an expensive scheme. Montenegro, which has proposed EU accession in 2025, offers a much cheaper alternative at 100,000 euros and an investment in a property in Montenegro, which the investment will depend on whereabouts you're buying the property. If it's in the capital, it's about 400,000, and if it's outside, it's 250,000. But it's a much cheaper alternative. And the applications are much quicker, 4 to 6 months, compared to Malta, which is at least 14 months. The other option in Europe is Portugal. So you can, and it's very popular, get a golden visa, which is a very low residency, like 7 days a year. And that after 5 years, there is a discretionary application for citizenship, but it's very discretionary and you have to speak Portuguese. So that might not be feasible. The last thing I just wanted to say before I finish is that in the UAE, where I've just come from, in late 2020, there was this new UAE scheme where you could get citizenship. This is not citizenship by investment, but it's actually reaching out to people like doctors, scientists, creatives, and inviting them to apply for citizenship on the basis that they can make a contribution to the UAE. Now, that's incredible amount of interest in this process. And just before I left, there was also another announcement to say they wouldn't expect you to give up your other citizenship. So, you know, you can have this in addition to your existing citizenship. And nominations go through a strict process with the government. But it's created a lot of interest for people who are in the UAE. And I think this whole topic's quite interesting. And as I say, it's like a sort of super extension of the remote working visa.
Okay, so that sounds fascinating. We're going to go on to the tax aspects of citizenship. But what we're saying now, because typically we look at visas and work permits, but this is going to be, as I talked about, for the high net worth or people moving permanently at very senior levels, typically given the level of investment. Although less so in some countries, but it certainly, in particular, is a great way of getting access into the EU for many.
Yeah, and also I think the other thing is that with the future of work and more remote working, it might be of more interest to people because it might be a lifestyle choice as well, that they actually can do their job from this new country. Absolutely,
which obviously raises tax implications. So with perfect timing, we're going to say goodbye to you, Julia, and see you at the end.
Thank you.
And we're going to bring Pat on board now.
Lovely.
Pat, how you doing?
Good day to you, Brian. Hi, everybody.
And to you, Pat. And a couple of interesting comments just coming in here relating to what Julia said. Coming out here, the UK stance on double citizenship, example being dual citizenship at Bloomberg, now jailed in Iran. Is this something that may be part of a second citizenship in the future? And Fiona put, for talent acquisition, people now wanting 2 passports or permanent resident. I mean, I think from a tax point of view, it's quite different, isn't it? I mean, most countries are going to be based on residency, and citizenship, by and large, is irrelevant, unless, of course, we're talking about the United States.
Of course. Did you know, Brian, that I have 2 passports? I've got my regular one.
Yeah.
And I've got my vaccine passport. So this one is a little bit maybe more valuable at the moment.
Is that going to let you into bars and theaters?
Yes, hopefully so. Hopefully so.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, you know, when Julia started talking about this citizenship by investment concept, it certainly piqued my interest because, you know, the concept of citizenship-based taxation has been around for quite some time. But let's go through some of the basics. How individuals are taxed. As a non-resident, you could potentially be taxed based on the source of the income. So in passive income, interest and dividends, capital gains, that would be based on where that income is actually coming from. If it's wages, it's based on where you're working, where you're rendering the services. So that's the first way. The second way is the more common way for most individuals. That's based on residency. So if you meet the criteria for being a resident of a particular country, then typically you're being taxed on a worldwide basis. So doesn't matter what the source is, you are on a worldwide tax basis. Now, of course, there's exceptions to that, but generally speaking, that's how the residency-based would work. And of course, as a resident, then you're looking for the potential for double tax relief. So you'd be claiming foreign tax credits, perhaps, or being able to take advantage of some tax treaties. And then, of course, the third way individuals are taxed, citizenship-based taxation. That's a mouthful, isn't it? So it doesn't matter where you live or work, you always are taxed on a worldwide basis. Brian, do you know which countries do citizenship-based tax?
I do, and we actually did this as a fun fact a while ago. Whereas the United States and Eritrea.
That's right. Those are the only 2 that I'm aware of that tax their citizens on worldwide income.
But I think even in Eritrea, it's only about 2% of the normal rate or something. That the United States is definitely the master of this.
Yes. So and you know, we Americans.
This actually goes back to your founding fathers and the whole concept of no taxation without representation.
Yes, actually, in preparing for today's show, I did learn how this came about. The first income tax in the United States started 1850s, 1860s, and they put in the citizenship-based taxation rule during the Civil War so that individuals that were leaving the country could not avoid the draft. So that's why America has citizen-based taxation, unfortunately. So it doesn't matter if an American is non-resident in the United States, they're still taxed on a worldwide basis. So these are all tax rules that are well known within the global mobility community. And, you know, you think about what the Americans often will do. They'll be so frustrated with it, they'll actually try to give up their citizenship. They'll renounce their citizenship. And that's, you know, not for light of heart. It's an expensive process. You potentially, if you're a wealthy individual, you potentially will pay an exit tax when you renounce your citizenship. So it's a possibility, but, you know, not very many are doing it. So you end up with this situation that American expats have, where they are resident in another country, but they're a citizen of the United States. So they are being taxed on a worldwide basis in 2 different jurisdictions. And then you're looking for double tax relief, any sort of foreign tax credit that you can use to offset. Maybe you're using a treaty-based position to claim treaty relief. What's interesting about the U.S. treaties that are in place is they have, well, many treaties have what's called the treaty tiebreaker article. So that's the piece of the treaty that determines who has overriding claim to residency status. And all the U.S. treaties have what's called a savings clause. And that's there so that no matter whatever the other language of the treaty says, Americans are still based on a citizenship-based worldwide taxation. So all fun times for us Americans. I guess it's a privilege to pay worldwide tax compared to other expatriates, unfortunately.
Absolutely. We'll move you on, Pat, because I need to bring Emma on stage. But actually, it's absolutely fascinating what you're saying there. And one thing I know is that anybody who's born in America, of course, is what I think they call an accidental American.
That's right.
And so yeah. I know people. I've got family members who were born in America and left at the age of 6 months, and they're still to this day happily filing their US tax returns.
That's right.
I was told that you cannot renounce your US citizenship before the age of 18 on the basis you're not adult, and nobody can make that decision for you. And I'm told there is a grace period for that exit tax you're talking about for the first 6 months after you turn 18. So between 18 and 18 years, 6 months, you can renounce without having to pay any exit tax. But after that, you get caught in the US tax net.
Yeah, well, so let's move on to Julia's point about citizenship by investment. So you would end up in most locations when you do obtain citizenship, you then drop to the normal domestic rules for residency. So in many cases, if you are setting roots in that new country, you will likely be triggering residency status and then taxed. At a minimum, as a non-resident, you'd be taxed on the investments you're making. So many of those programs require substantial investments or time in country. So you will likely be triggering some type of a tax, either non-resident or resident tax with that citizenship that you're obtaining. So it's an interesting field. I think that many global mobility managers have come across this with their assignee population.
Okay, that's really, really interesting stuff. What we're now going to do, Pat, is we'll see you at the end of the show, but we're going to bring Emma on stage. So what I really want, we're getting some lovely, kind comments from people saying how much they enjoy the show. Let's give it up for Emma, and if everybody could raise their applause by hitting that little button on LinkedIn or the like button. Let's see the screen lighting up, and we'll bring on stage the one and only Emma Boccagni from ECA. Emma, hi.
Hi, Brian. Hi, everyone.
So is it Emanuela or is it Emma?
It is. It is definitely Emma for anyone who knows me well.
Okay. Well, everybody who's out there, we've got hundreds of people out there. You're now Emma. So Emanuela has been consigned to history. You're Emma in the industry now. Anyway, it's great. It's great to have you on the show. Now, we've known each other for quite a while, and I'm not detecting. I know you live in West London, but I'm not detecting an English accent there. And I don't think Boccagni is, and I'm sure I'm pronouncing that terribly wrong. I don't think that's going to be English name. So tell us, where were you born and where did you grow up?
It's actually pretty good pronunciation, I have to say. My last name isn't always the easiest. And yes, as you know, I'm Italian. I was born and lived in Italy until after university, really, and I've since lived mostly in the UK, but for a few years in Germany as well. So hello to Priscilla there. She was saying ciao Emma. Quite rightly, that's the best way to say hello.
Okay, and so you went to school and uni in Italy.
Yes, that's right. All of it in Italy, and my family is still all in Italy. Hello to anyone who is in Italy at the moment. I wish I could come home a bit more frequently, but unfortunately, obviously, it hasn't been possible over the last few months. Yeah,
and it's been a tough year. We'll get on to that. Well, sadly, I think we're going to get on to the year we all want to forget in a moment. But let's just stick with you, because I mean, I always ask people how they got into mobility, and I think your route was slightly unusual. Mind you, we had Marissa on a couple of weeks ago who wanted to be an FBI agent, and that was her route into mobility, which was a first for me. And then we had a whole host of people that said they wanted to be FBI agents, and that was their career. I'm guessing that was not anything that was high on your agenda.
No, nothing quite that exotic.
You studied languages at university, is that right?
That's right. I studied German literature primarily, and yes, so not quite the path perhaps that you'd expect leads into mobility, but there was from the beginning for me always the focus on travel, on ideally gaining my own experience in relocating, living and working abroad. And I think that attitude really does help understanding the challenges of everything to do with the expatriation and the people we work most closely with.
Okay, well, we always do a fun fact, actually. I think I'll just throw one in here just now. Actually, I might even do more than one fun fact. I'm in that sort of mood today. Let's just... So today's fun fact, now you know the answer, so this is for the audience. It's who's this man? Who's this man? Okay, so let's try not to give away the game for the moment. I must admit, I'd never, ever, ever heard of him, which is showing but he's a bit of a hero of yours, I gather.
Yes, very true. Past ambitions and definitely linked with my studies more than with the path my career took after that. But pretty famous in his sphere of action.
Okay, I'll see. I don't know whether we've got any comments coming in. I can't see any comments coming in on that. There's always a bit of a time delay on that. But he was a philosopher, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. Philosopher and essayist and a very solid thinker. A bit of a genius in his field again. And active in the 30s and early 40s.
And how did his I'll see, I don't know whether anyone's come in with the answer, but we'll say, because everyone's saying no idea. He was a man called Priscilla Monticelli has said no idea. I had no idea. It's a man called Walter Benjamin. Now this has got to be the most obscure way ever to get into global mobility. But you actually translated some of his works from German into Italian.
Yes, that's right. Some lesser known work called Berlin Chronicle. He wrote a lot about his childhood. Oh yeah, that one. That's another fun fact.
So basically, you translated a piece of work which was fairly obscure from German into Italian.
Yes.
And that led you into language, and that led you into becoming mobility. I must tell you, I mean, I heard that story, and I did study a little bit of German at school, but not very much, just to what we call the GCSE level, which is the basic level. And I was thinking about Berliner Chronik, and then I was walking down the street, and I think we all know what President Kennedy once said, his famous Cold War speech, "Ich bin ein Berliner," and I saw this on my street. Which I thought he would be mortified to see what happened to his famous phrase, "Ich bin ein Binliner." I suppose we ought to move on. So what happened? You then became a translator.
Yeah.
So what was your first job?
So yes, the idea of literary translation was quite ambitious, didn't necessarily pay the bills. So it seemed to make sense to get into more commercial level of translation. So I got my first proper translation job in a mail order company, or e-commerce company, I suppose you should really call it. And that's in Germany, where I lived for a few years in Hamburg. And Hamburg has a very active expert scene, actually, but I still didn't truly know much about that world until a little bit later. So there's only so much fun you can have translating, a description of a T-shirt and a pair of jeans. I suppose with the occasional slightly more fun article, such as risque underwear items that were also part of the mail order catalogs. But aside from that, it wasn't exactly super exciting. So I was ready for a change, and that's when I kind of ended up thinking about the possibilities that a place like London offers, and then I saw an ECA job advert, actually. And
ECA wanted you because of your language skills?
Well, yes, ECA wanted me because of the language skills, I suppose, at that particular point. And what I thought was really interesting was finding out about the company, because I didn't know that there was a field, such a niche field of companies specializing in global mobility alone. It wasn't a thing for me yet, and I just thought it was so interesting.
So, so Emma took German thoughts and sent them. Oh, it's gone too quickly. Bring it back. Thank you. That's Melinda backstage. Took it off too quick. So Emma took German thoughts and sent them on a permanent assignment to Italy. Wunderbar. But I mean, I think it's amazing how we went from translating an obscure philosopher to translating a T-shirt and jeans catalogue to ECA, and now, of course, you've risen through ECA to become the commercial director. So, and you've been there quite a while now, haven't you?
Yes, it's just over 11 years, I think, by my count. So yeah, quite a long time, which isn't, I have to say, that unusual. I have a few colleagues who've been in the company for longer than that, and still quite excited about the roles. So it's one of the really solid, strong things that we have, this connection with the company. But yes, like you said, started off as an account manager, primarily, looking after the Italian market, and I still have some really strong connection with our Italian clients for obvious obvious reasons. And
let's talk a bit about ECA then, because I suspect most people in the industry do know ECA, but what I find unusual about ECA, or unique about ECA, is the way you were formed and the structure. It's your birthday this year. I mean, obviously not your birthday. Obviously you've got everyone's got a birthday every year. It's a big birthday for ECA, isn't it?
Yes.
Is it your 50th birthday this year?
Mm-hmm. That's very true. Yes, early November.
Yeah.
Not mine quite yet, but for ECA, it's the 50th birthday at the beginning of November. Yes, so we were founded in 1971, so it's a big one this year. And we're still hoping that there'll be a good opportunity to celebrate later in the year together. But yes, 5 decades in global mobility.
Well, I'm just looking forward to my invitation. I will come and celebrate with you if invited. If we are allowed out to have parties, God, wouldn't that be nice? We'll actually have a party. But ECA was started by a consortium of companies, wasn't it? I mean, it's very unusual in its structure. So do you want to just tell us a bit about how ECA was formed and the structure of it?
Yes, sure. It is indeed unusual, as you say, because it was almost like a salary club, I suppose you could call it, a set of blue chip companies, some really big names, some of those still very influential in our organization to this day and still using us and taking our services, deciding that it made a lot more sense to essentially centralize the research into data around global mobility. And that's how the company was originally set up. and the model has evolved over the years significantly, of course. So we now have over 30 different shareholders, and we've spoken about this before, quite a few really large organizations, the like of Heineken and Philips and Ericsson and many more with a foothold presence across the world. And and we still work with the majority of the companies that founded us.
It's a brilliant idea, and I think it's really quite ahead of its time 50 years ago, that basically 30 companies got together and said, let's share information, and we'll set up an independent company to do that. And then, of course, you've now expanded and you've got hundreds of other clients around the world who aren't shareholders, but just regular clients. But it's such a unique way of starting a business.
Yes, I think it's also what sets us apart a bit from for a more traditional company setup. But like we said, it has changed, it has evolved. There is, of course, a commercially minded, strong business sense behind it today. And also we have evolved quite a bit from being a data house, because that was the true origin, into being more of a solution provider. That is what our clients are challenging us with. That's what they want, really. They're not just interested in the individual price of potatoes in a particular country, because it's easy enough to have access to that. It's about knowing how to interpret it, how to use it, but particularly also how to find out how to read your data, how to read metrics and analytics from it. So we branched out into different aspects of technology, from standalone calculators into full assignment management systems. And we cover also the side that is more advisory with consultative work and the training. So it's quite varied as an offering, I suppose, in comparison with the initial, the beginnings that were purely about the data. Okay,
so let's move on. Let's talk about the year from hell. Let's talk about 2020. What did you learn? 2020 was a shock for everybody. I mean, the world suddenly stopped turning and people stopped moving. And in fact, questions come in there. I mean, from your role as commercial director, what are the challenges you can see post COVID-19? Let's get at the moment. We'll get onto that in a second, Mena. But let's start off. Can you just tell us a bit about what you learned during that year? And then let's talk about what you think is going to happen.
Yes. Yes, I think, first of all, possibly an expression that has been used quite a lot in similar contexts comes to mind: never let a good crisis go to waste. I believe it was initially Churchill, but plenty of other people have said it after that. And it is very true.
It's a great one. I'll be saying it soon. I probably won't actually read it to anybody. I'll just claim it's mine. I'll be saying it. Okay. Never waste a good crisis. So absolutely. So we had an amazing crisis. I mean, it's one of the best crises ever for our industry. Yeah. But we've been through that, and it's been a horrendous year. I know, I made light of it, but I know a lot of people, were put on furlough or lost their jobs. I mean, it's been horrendous. But also, I think we did learn how resilient our industry is, and hopefully we're beginning to see a bit of bounce back now. But you, as a global organisation, of course, we're seeing it in different countries at different times.
Yes, without a doubt, it really has been a very challenging year for everyone, and I think possibly, for our industry, in some cases, a bit of an existential crisis, you could say. Our service is still needed, and I very much strongly feel yes, but you could have put all of that into question throughout 2020. As you say, one of the reasons we are quite fortunate as a company at ECA is that we have a presence across the globe. So as a restriction hit certain part of the world, others were opening up a bit more. It still happens to this day, of course, but I'm just thinking with the fact that we have an office in Hong Kong, one in Sydney, and one in New York, we hit the toughest time at probably different moment, and that helped us, of course, cope better. So if I think even the last couple of months, to give you a small example, we've been mostly at home in our London office, and my colleague Anna in Australia has been able to arrange client lunches, and we're all very envious about that. Very, very small example, of course, but our colleagues in Hong Kong are all back in the office already, and we don't yet have that ability. Similarly, the various industry sectors that we serve have been hit in a different way. We still speak today with clients who tell us nothing much has, to be honest, changed for them, because they still had that business in that fundamental need to move people. And so they just had to keep going.
Okay. And if we go back to Menna's comment, I'll just put it up on screen here. What do you think the challenges that you can see post-COVID-19? Actually, I'm going to turn that around. I'm going to add to that. Not just what are the challenges you can see post-COVID-19, what about the opportunities? What are the opportunities and challenges that you see going forward? So let's talk 21, 22, you know, the next couple of years, even next 3 years, maybe.
Yes. So I think one of the good things that came out of the last year for a lot of the companies we work with is that there was a bit of spotlight on mobility professionals. This has also been spoken about quite a lot, the ability to shine a bit more by necessity as well, by the need to be more involved in various activities. So that has, I suppose, contributed to raise the profile of mobility and probably to get our clients involved in some activities that maybe traditionally have not been part of their usual day-to-day. So from our perspective, it means also adapting the way to a new way of working with our clients. It's not the regular level of support, it's going above and beyond. It's being truly a partner they can lean on, and really nurturing that advisory capacity that has been highlighted throughout the pandemic. So a different way of working with our clients, I would say. And then because we've all had to adjust to using a lot more technology, one of the things that has been highlighted in the past about global mobility is that the whole of the HR function tends to be a bit reluctant in adopting new technology and adopting automation. Well, it has been forced upon everyone now, and we're starting to get a bit more of an appetite for it. And and technology as an enabler is certainly something else that is coming out strongly from the pandemic as a trend, as something that mobility teams are no longer prepared to do without. And it certainly feeds that idea that they can be more expert advisor to the business if they have the right data and the right tools. Yeah,
I mean, I get that. I mean, and going back to the point of, never waste a good crisis, or however we put it, never waste a good pandemic. I think Michael Cadden put it like that, is that, this is our opportunity to actually step up a bit to the plate. And because I think people now realize, maybe in a way they didn't, how vital mobility is to the successful running of the organization. Now, one thing I wanted to get onto is, I know you guys have produced a survey. You did it a couple of months ago, I think, and the results are out now. And you had, I think it's called your Managing Mobility Survey. So we'll give that a plug. I'm sure there's details on your website how people can access it, and I think there's a webinar out there that people can see. But let's just let's just talk about that a little bit. Let's just talk about this survey that you did. I mean, how many people took part in it, and let's go through into some of the findings of it.
Yes, sure. So it's something that we try to do relatively regularly, so that we have baseline data, and that we can do a bit of comparison across the years. The whole of the managing mobility is taken into consideration. So how do our clients, how do any responding company manage their programs, from how the function is organized to staffing ratios and other things that we can touch on now. So we had this year we had 330 participants from a variety of different headquarter countries, I think more than 30. So it's a nice varied sample that enabled us to draw some interesting conclusions. And clearly, because of when we ran this survey, again, the pandemic was was particularly affecting it. But that's also a way of capturing the spirit of the time at the end of the day. So we did want to know exactly what influence it had had. Yes, it was published. Sorry.
Yeah, well, let's. I want to get into some of the findings. And one, we've spent a lot of time on these shows in the past talking about some of the issues around how people are managing their programs. But let's just start off by talking about managing the function itself, about how people actually manage their own functions. And actually, and one of the things you touched on in that survey, and I want to just get the audience thinking about this too, is staffing ratios. And by staffing ratios, we mean how many GM staff do you have for the assignees, or rather how many assignees per GM staff number. And actually we did a LinkedIn poll on that, and I'll just sort of, well, I'll come to that in a minute. But the question we asked is, what is a typical GM staff ratio? So I'd like the audience to start coming up with numbers, and maybe just telling us what they think. You know, in other words, do you expect to see maybe 20 assignees per GM member of staff, or 50 or 100 or 200 or 10 or whatever? So let's just throw that out there and just see what the audience say. But I mean, from your point of view, that must be, you know, how people, I know there's different ways of structuring it, but, you know, it depends to what extent you outsource or you don't outsource. So there's going to be a range, but it's quite an interesting statistic. And I'm guessing that large organizations run it more efficiently than smaller. Would you say that? Or maybe they use technology more?
Definitely, yes. As you say, there are a number of variables in how you look at this. So you always have to take this kind of stats with a pinch of salt. All the same, considering that the vast majority of respondents do outsource. So I think it's nearly 90% typically would outsource certain elements of their mobility management. We know that that's almost a constant as well. And so we really just try to focus on full-time global mobility employees dedicated to the management of our program. And we try then to establish what is the ratio for the management of longer term classic type of assignment, and also for short term. And as you say, a typical result that we see is that that ratio changes depending on how large our program is. So the larger the program, the more efficiencies possibilities there are, and therefore you see the ratio going up. And it's quite different, of course, for companies that are perhaps newer to mobility or have only a handful of cases. But it is a good indication, I suppose, of general efficiency level, and technology certainly helps it a lot too. And that is linked again with the program size. It is much more, of course, typical for a larger program to be able to rely on some technology, even though we still know quite a lot of our clients who use hundreds of Excel spreadsheets for hundreds of different assignee cases.
Okay, well, look, here, this is what we did a poll on LinkedIn, and that's what the poll showed as a result. It said that 10% of the population said that they'd expect a ratio of somewhere of less than 25 to 1. 30% said 25 to 50. 39%, so I suppose that's the biggest group, said 50 to 100, and 21% said they'd see more than 100 assignees per member of staff. But actually, let's see if we can convert this into a fun fact. I'm having a bit of a fun fact day today, so let's get another one up. Okay, so here's our fun fact. According to your study, and I appreciate that it's only a study and it's only as good as the sample, and we'll come on to that, but what did you find as being the median number of assignees per GM staff member?
So the median was 1 to 39 for the management of classic long-term assignments. A bit different for the short term, where we were on approximately 1 to 23. Now, on both accounts, there has been an efficiency clearly gained since the last time that we measured it, because we were around 1 to 33 for long term and 1 to, if I remember correctly, 13 for short term in previous survey results. So whether it is because of technology enhancing what mobility teams can do, or also because of efficiency gains from learning to deal better with the same set of countries, perhaps. But yes, the numbers are going up slightly. I think the 1 to 25 that came up in the answers is probably more wishful thinking, because that would be...
or maybe a very small program.
Yes,
But these numbers, are you saying that the GM people are dealing with the long-term assignment and the short-term. So that one person is dealing with 39 plus 23.
Well, yes, it is indeed those two types. Those two types are the ones that are still more characteristically part of the ownerships and the responsibility areas of the global mobility function. And it changes also quite a bit if you start looking at larger program size. It's a lot more common to see that it moves into the 1 to 80 even. So the moment you have more than 200 or 300 active cases per year, that ratio increases to around 1 to 80 is a more common one that we see. And yes, as you quite rightly were pointing out, we're still talking about people who are handling long-term cases, short-term cases, permanent transfer a lot more at the moment, commuter cases. Part of the survey still highlighted the fact that business travelers tend to be perhaps still a little bit separate from the mobility team, but certainly a trend that we are seeing is that the mobility team are being dragged a lot more into also the conversations around business travelers because of all the complexities that are around the preparation work, the registration requirements, etc., and the big topic of tracking for them as well.
Okay, you mentioned some of the challenges that came up in your survey. Do you want to talk about? So I think cost was in there. I mean, what were the challenges that people said were really facing them in their day-to-day jobs in your survey?
Yes, so cost is definitely there. I mean, it goes intuitively, I suppose, to understand that in the middle of a pandemic, the kind of financial crisis that we're facing, there are budget constraints from a lot of the companies we work with in the industry. But it's a slightly different challenge that I'm thinking of now. It is more around cost effectiveness, but with the understanding of what is the added value that mobility is bringing. So it's truly understanding how can you be more value driven in what you offer, which automatically also becomes, I think, more cost effective. So it could potentially mean less classic assignment. Of course, it could potentially mean looking a lot more closely at what each assignment is bringing in terms of its potential value to the business.
Is that the dreaded? Sorry to cut across. Is that the dreaded return on investment that everybody talks about and everyone's struggling?
Yes, as much as it probably comes across as a bit of a stereotype, it was still mentioned as one of the biggest challenges in terms of what measuring it. Of course, is still up there into I think somebody in one of your interviews in the past defined it still as the holy grail of global mobility. But to try and bring it back into something a little more easily digestible, I sometimes see if you are not measuring costs properly, or if you are, but you're not maybe comparing your cost estimate with actual costs, you already don't have the foundation of that return on investment, and so it becomes really difficult. Still thinking about challenges, it's the tracking again that had come up quite strongly. So we just touched on business travelers, and it's now more the idea that you need to track everyone because the pandemic has shown us the importance of knowing where everyone is, and it's not quite as absolutely a given as you would expect for a lot of companies to be in the position of saying where everyone is. So yeah, it certainly has highlighted to many companies how having a solid solution in place is essential for the purposes of tracking.
Platform will do that. I mean, if I just plug Beniva for a second, I know our Beniva platform automatically can track and can tell you at any what point in time where everybody is simply off their IP addresses. So there are ways that we can do that now, which is which tech is helping. I did actually think of doing an April Fool. I did do an April Fool that many people saw, and hopefully it amused people. I think we had about 6,500 views of the April Fool. But I did actually think of doing an April Fool on the subject that the vaccine that everybody's getting was going to implant a tracking chip into you too, and that was going to be a great benefit to mobility, that we could track people through their vaccine. But we didn't run with that one. We ran with expats on the space station instead. Anyway, so we're talking a bit about return on investment, and we're talking about tracking. I think one of the other issues that came up, which I thought was interesting, and in a way it's a shame, is you also talked about the role that mobility have in actually recruiting expat assignee talent in the first place. Because Am I right in thinking that it's still the case that in many cases the first that GM know about somebody going on assignment is when they're told that somebody is going on assignment?
Yeah, I think there's still a little bit of that traditionally last to know going on. Perhaps not quite to the scale that I would have heard about myself 10 years ago when I started in global mobility, but all the same, the role of mobility in active recruitment is still far too limited, still appears, at least from the stats that we see, to be far too limited. And it's a real shame, again, because I think particularly with the lessons learned, linking it back to your previous question, the lesson learned from the pandemic and how mobility professionals have had to expand their own skills in, developing more empathy and more sympathy with the SMEs that they were dealing with. That certainly has created the foundations, I think, for their involvement in looking for that talent and understanding better what people are going through, to a point that could actually be quite helpful and definitely of value in a recruitment context, but not quite there necessarily yet.
Okay, and we've talked a bit about predictions for 2021, but when we were talking earlier, you used an interesting phrase about travel, and I wonder if you could just talk about that, because I it's not a phrase I'd heard before, and I thought it sort of summed up a lot of maybe the world that we've just left behind.
Yes, that's right. I think we were particularly talking of the expression vanity travel, which isn't mine, by the way. It's something.
First here, guys. Well, I heard it first here. Maybe you've heard it before. Vanity travel. What is vanity travel, and what are your predictions on it? It doesn't sound good. Well, it is quite apt, really, as an expression for the current circumstances. It's not mine. It's something that came up in a conversation with my colleague Tom Crosby from Tracker Software Technologies, the global tracker tool. And I think he came across it at a business travel event. It certainly, it fits nicely with what we're living through, because it describes the type of non-essential business travel that has been put on hold for a number of months now. So all those meet and greet, especially to build new business and encourage sales, that you have to wonder, is it going to come back anytime soon? That's probably the category of business travel that is more at risk, and it's a real shame from my perspective. Particularly looking after new business for ECA as well, and it's building that rapport that is much more difficult to do virtually. But yeah, vanity travel is unlikely to be one of the first ones to be restored. And similarly, that there's another expression I'm thinking of linked to this, really, the idea of leisure. So then it's another bit of a buzz word, I suppose, but linked to the vanity travel, because the idea is that you do a business trip, probably a vanity business trip, and you add on a weekend, which you are spending more for leisure somewhere. Now, some organizations are predicting that there's going to be more of these. I actually have heard also some of our clients saying that they'll try to put a ban on that because of the implications around, health and safety and duty of care. Who is responsible for how the person, for the safety and of the person themselves in the leisure part of that trip? It becomes relatively complex. Yeah, I mean, I would be delighted to see vanity travel go, and maybe it's because I sort of got the grey hairs and I've done it. But I mean, I did some crazy trips. I used to head up, as many people know, the human capital practice of one of the big four accounting firms, and I remember once going to Hong Kong for a day. Basically, it was a day trip to Hong Kong because we had a particular client. It was an investment bank, and there was a risk of losing the contract, and I had to go out to be there and doing the meeting and greeting and the glad handing. I remember doing a trip I had to go to I think Melbourne or somewhere to do something similar. And then I had another client had an issue in California, so I flew to Melbourne via Irvine and doing pictures in one and pictures the other. And you fly in the whole team for pictures. And, in many cases, there's some people there that have to be there, and there's some people there just to show, the bigwig has turned up and it's an important client. And I do wonder whether actually that was just crazy from a health point of view, from a duty of care point of view, from a cost point of view, from a carbon footprint footprint point of view, and maybe that one of the upshots of the pandemic is that we will be a bit more sensible and not require people to get on a plane, every other day. I mean, I remember one day I had a lunch meeting at Heathrow Airport, a breakfast meeting at Heathrow Airport, a lunch meeting in Frankfurt, and a dinner meeting in Madrid, all in one day. I mean, it was just crazy back in the day. And if those days are behind us, then rant over. But I'm all for that. Do you think we're going to see that, or do you think we're going to see all this mad business travel we used to do come back exactly as it was?
As much as I'm kind of the opposite, I do love the mad business travel that you were just describing. I recognize it's also perhaps not the most sensitive way to go about it. And I do think things are going to become a lot more selective. So what business trips really do need to happen, it's unlikely to be the ones that you were just describing, or the simple conference one, but rather perhaps the kind that has a more technical, stronger basis. So the more complex ones as well, because it means that they will require a lot of documentation. You will need to look at immigration, even for those business trips, and registrations, and posted worker declarations, etc. So more selective, I think, but also perhaps more sustainable. We have already heard from the airline industries really looking at ways of traveling more sustainably, and perhaps it's not going to be for this year, but I think it is coming.
Yeah, I think there's so much we could be talking about. I think sadly we're actually pretty much out of time. Let me bring on Pat and Julia. There's Pat, and where's the other? That's the dynamic duo. I still haven't worked out which one's Batman and which one's Robin, but there you go. But it was a great double act you did today, Julia and Pat. Really, really appreciate it. Emma, it's been a blast having you on the show.
So interesting. Yeah.
Absolutely, and thank you for all your insights. I know that survey is available. We posted links to it, and it's available on your website. I think there's a recording of a webinar for people if they want to watch.
Right, yes.
But thank you, everybody. We are back next week with Benevo Bites with Wes Okamura and Eric Halverson, and in the week after that with Steve Brown from Electronic Arts. So we've got a real Silicon Valley feel coming over the next couple of weeks. So thank you, everybody. Hope you've enjoyed the show, and see you all again next week.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.